Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review comes from the year of 1974. I'm gonna have to do a video on films in 1974 because it was quite a good year. This is Orders from Michel Barrault, who's a very influential Canadian filmmaker. This is one of Canadian International Pictures, or CIP, through Vinegar Syndrome. This is a docudrama based on real events of October 1970. I'm hoping our resident Canadian Ben can help me out with this one. This is pretty much based on the October crisis of 1970, as I said, when members of the FLQ, which is a group from like the early 60s, but it was different iterations of them, pretty much essentially Free Quebec group. I mean, one of their iterations, and a fun little anecdote in the extras, one of their iterations sold dynamite to a black liberation group in America because their plan was to blow up the Statue of Liberty, which is a nice idea, but obviously didn't pan out. It comes with the English details in the back and also the French one. The film is in French, strangely enough. Most of the action that the FLQ did over the years was in Montreal or thereabouts. The FLQ wasn't a huge organisation. It wasn't like the IRA or whatever, but amongst their first targets were kind of signs of British colonialism, so they blew up like statues of Queen Victoria and such. But in October 1970 they kidnapped two dignitaries, I think a Labour or a Minister for Labour in the government, again hopefully Ben can correct me, and a British diplomat, and this made President Trudeau, who's a fairly famous Canadian president, he was in twice, he invoked the War Act, which pretty much meant that the government arrested and jailed about 479 people with no charge, just in an attempt to try and get to the bottom of who kidnapped these two people. So anybody that was kind of important in a union, or anybody who had certain political views, were pretty much just scooped up in the middle of the night or whenever, and again put into prison without any kind of warning or without any charges, basically. So the film is very obviously Kafka, but when this was happening in 1970, Michel Barrault went out into the streets, and of course he was told he couldn't actually film anything, and the recurring thing was, it's orders. When he would ask why you can't film anything, it's basically orders. So the film is about a society where the government invokes a law or an act or whatever is in their head at the time, and if anybody asks why they're arresting people without any evidence or charges, they just say we're following orders. And obviously throughout history, people have followed orders. You know, it would be great if all the armies in the world refused to follow orders in the future, and if presidents or prime ministers or dictators or whoever wanted to start a war, all the armed forces would just say, well, we're not following orders. If you want to fight a war, you go into a field with a sharp stick. There's another president or prime minister at the other end of the field, a sharp stick. You two have at it and leave all of us to get on with our lives. But sadly, that's probably not going to happen. But that's what the film is essentially about. There's a couple of nice little ideas going on. He uses black and white and colour. I won't tell you for what purpose, but he has the actors introduce themselves as actors and saying, I'm playing this person in the film. The film's dialogue pretty much comes from testimony of the people that were arrested. And you get the impression that the majority of them weren't like treated badly or anything like that. There is a kind of extreme case where one of the prisoners is told he's going to be executed in 3 days, and obviously the psychological damage of that. But again, you can read into it. You know, governments can do anything they like, essentially under whatever guise. Now, obviously, there was a kidnapping, and one of the kidnapping victims was murdered. So again, from a certain point of view, you could argue, oh, it's completely justified to get to the bottom of who did this kidnapping, to round up almost 500 people and put them in prison with no evidence and no charges. But obviously, most people would say that's probably not the way to do it, but that's the way it was done. Sadly, this is based on fact. So this idea that, you know, I think we all have an idea of Canada as being this lovely, peaceful place where everybody settles things with a conversation rather than going straight to violence. But if you have Kahana Tatsi, the other CIP documentary about Canada, which is wonderful as well, you'll kind of get a better appreciating that even Canada has had its problems with violence and tyranny and such matters. So the film is wonderful because, again, the other idea, apart from, you know, everybody follows orders regardless of how inhumane those orders are, is also this could happen to anybody, and that's a point of the film. None of these people are radicals. None of these people are involved with the kidnapping. Spoiler alert, you know, this is not a thriller with an ending where somebody confesses to the kidnapping or anything. It's not like that at all. This is heavy on the realism side, even though we're initially shown the artifice of the actors saying, this is my name and I'm playing this character in the film, or this person in the film. And obviously the difference between the black and white and the colour. Yeah, it will make you obviously think, and for all those people that say the government's there to look after you, as we know, that's complete nonsense. But also leans into all those people that keep weapons in a shed in case the day the government comes for them, as if weapons in a shed is going to stop them. But it's a nice idea anyway. So that this film won't change those people's minds, but it might change the people's minds of people who think governments, even in Canada, are kind of benevolent and won't trample the common man, woman and child if they get in their way. Because again, at certain stages, you know, the prisoners ask the guards, they ask the warden, they ask and again, it's just, we're following orders. That's above my pay grade, we're following orders. So it's a fascinating little film. The extras on this are exceptional. So it's scanned and restored from a 35mm print. So I mean, it doesn't look like a 4K or anything like that, but you wouldn't expect it to because it is a docudrama essentially. There's a new commentary with filmmaker Professor Frederic Peltier and author Professor Gabrielle Tremblay. Images of Immediacy from 2024, which is 26 minutes, is a new interview with author-producer André Lawel, who talks about Michel Brault. There's Love at First Sight from 2024, which is a 17-minute interview with the sound recordist Serge Beauchemin. Apologies for butchering all these French names. A Peaceful Nation, The Road to October 1970, which is 18 minutes from 2024, which is wonderful for the background and kind of the history of the FLQ kind of movement. And that's with historian Professor Sylvain Garel, filming the FLQ from 2024, which is 17 minutes long, which is Sylvain Garel again on the history of the Feliquism movement. In the Shadow of Kafka from 2024, which is 18 minutes, is a new interview with author Professor Angelos Koussatakis. The October Crisis 50 Years On from 2020, which are interviews with some of the actors from the film, as well as filmmaker Mathieu Denis. Michel Brault Lives Again at Cannes. Classics 2015 from 13 minutes, which is an interview with Brault, Gauthier and actor Jean Lapointe. On Screen from 2008, which is 48 minutes, which is a wonderful documentary about the making of Orders. Le Racketeur from 1958, it's a 15-minute groundbreaking documentary short directed by Brault and Gilles Greux. And there's trailers for 4 films directed or co-directed by Brault. Pour la Suite du Monde from 1963, Between the Sea and Fresh Water from 1967, Acadia from 1971, and Orders from 1974. Of course, there's a booklet as well, like an essay with filmmaker Denis Coté. So it's an absolutely stacked release, as you'd expect from CIP. They're probably my second favourite Vinegar Syndrome sister title behind Canny, but CIP do great work of little odd films and documentaries, and Orders as well worth seeing if you think it couldn't happen to you, because it could happen to you. So please let me know if you've seen Orders, and hopefully Ben will correct all my mistakes in the comments, keep me right. It is a wonderful little film. Would you watch it every 6 weeks? No, but it's certainly well worth checking out and having in anybody's collection. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying thank you very much for watching and farewell.